Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise. This is a podcast series where we dissect stories from Star Trek, the original series, where we look for story structure, something that we like, the story arcs, whatever else there is in the episodes. We've been doing it one by one. This is going to be no exception. I am Bala Ramudurai, and with me I have my co-host Parvati.
Everyone, and welcome to Journey to Babel. I think we're going to have fun here, but because there's so much confusion.
Okay, Journey to Babel. And actually, the first time I saw it, I wondered what's the Babel all about. This time I
Yeah.
got it. We will talk about it after your summary.
When this episode opens, you have the USS Enterprise orbiting the planet Vulcan. This is where Spock also grew up. They're waiting for a Vulcan ambassador called Sarek to board the Enterprise. There are already 114 delegates on board, and this is to take them to a third planet where they want the United Federation of Planets to gather and decide whether they want to admit a planet called Coridan into the Federation. Coridan is a planet with a lot of dilithium crystals vital for space travel, and they have a lot of it. Giving them Federation membership will allow them to have protection, keeping these dilithium crystals safe. However, it also throws a wrench into the plans of smugglers. Sarek the Vulcan boards the Enterprise. He has a human wife called Amanda, and it is revealed that he is actually Spock's estranged father. His mother, Amanda, is a sweet woman. However, she is having a bit of trouble dealing with Vulcan logic and emotionless behavior. Spock apparently joined Starfleet, which his father did not want him to do. His father wanted him to continue the tradition of remaining on Vulcan and focusing on Vulcan science. Instead, Spock chose otherwise, and that is partly what has caused this estrangement. And as the delegates are now all on the ship, they find that there is some sort of attack coming in from outside from a ship moving at warp 10, which means it is much too fast for the Enterprise to pursue or fire at. It moves too quickly, and none of the phasers hit this particular ship. So, as that is happening, you also have all the delegates come to the common room of the Enterprise and they're having food, and you find a lot of alien races there. One particular alien race, the Tellarites, two of them, the Tellarite ambassador, approach the Vulcan Sarek and try to get into an altercation with him regarding the planet Coridan. It doesn't work out that well. And you are also introduced to a rather martial and savage alien race called the Andorans. They are blue with antennas on their heads. They are also not particularly friendly. Now, as all of this is happening, you find that something is going wrong within the Enterprise, because it seems that there are signals coming from within the Enterprise that are communicating with that fast moving ship outside. And then you have the tension between the delegates. And while all this is happening, Kirk finds that he's stabbed by the Andoran. There are two of them, the ambassador and his associate. The associate attacks Kirk, and he's injured. And then it also turns out that the Vulcan Sarek has something wrong with him. Basically, there is something wrong with his cardiovascular system, and he gets equivalents of heart attacks continuously. Now, the only way to save him is for Spock to give blood to him. Captain Kirk has also been injured. There is some intrigue about the ship. They are being attacked by this outsider ship, and Spock has to assume command. He refuses to give a blood transfusion, which his father so desperately needs, because duty comes first, and he holds on to that belief. He holds on to that belief so strongly that he becomes unreasonable, holding Vulcan logic over everything else. And his mother is infuriated with him. And what happens is, now, if the Vulcan ambassador dies, it will be a problem. Also, on a personal level for Spock, in spite of him pretending that it has no effect on him. Kirk decides to get up, go to the brig, and pretend that he's okay. So Spock relinquishes command and gives his father the blood transfusion he needs. the enemy ship pursuing them starts to attack, they have to play dead and try to disable the ship. They find out that one of the Andorans, the one that had attacked Kirk, is actually not an Andoran. He's some sort of an interloper or some sort of an impersonator, and the ship has been communicating with him the whole time. One of his antennas is fake, maybe both of his antennas are fake, and there is a receiver in one of those antennas. They bring him to the brig for Kirk to deal with him. They find that he is part of a smuggling ring. Now the issue is how to stop that alien ship and bring some sort of peace so that Coridan can be admitted into the Federation peacefully. Kirk decides to have the Enterprise play dead so that the smuggler ship slows down, which it does, and then they fire at it and disable it. But before they can bring any prisoners on board, the ship self destructs. And the impersonator Andoran also kills himself, saying that this is a suicide mission. So basically, that's where it ends. You go back to the medical bay, where you find that Sarek has recovered sufficiently for him to sit up and be alert. Spock is quite all right after all those blood transfusions. Spock says that the Andoran impersonator was probably an Orion, and they have a huge smuggling ring on Coridan, smuggling out dilithium crystals. Kirk is still sick. He has to be readmitted to the med bay, and McCoy has the last word, keeping those two men quiet. Back to you, Bala.
Here is the teaser plus the 4-act structure. And in the teaser, we see a mini episode sort of thing, or the high level concept of what's going to come in the 4 acts. It's about the ambassador from Vulcan arriving on board, and they're going to join all the other 114 delegates. That's what starts off with the teaser. In the teaser, you also get a big reveal that Ambassador Sarek from Vulcan and his wife are Spock's parents. You also see McCoy in a light mood. He is bugged with the uniform and attire. That is something that we also see. So that's what you see in the teaser. In the first act, we start with the mission of this episode itself, the journey to the planet Babel, where they're going to have this political conference. Delegates from all over the Federation are assembling there. Of course, this is also we see in the start of the first act is about this tension between, which is also revealed in the teaser, by the way, tension between Spock and his father, and we get to know why in the start of the first act. So the conflicts are revealed in the first act itself. By the end of the first act, we also see the Tellarite and Sarek fighting verbally first. Then we see the Tellarite, whose name is Gav, the ambassador himself, is dead. Ambassador Gav is dead, found in the Jeffries tube, hanging upside down. So we know that this is the main focus of the entire episode, politics and the personal tension between Sarek and Spock. Second act is all about what's going on with this murder of Gav. So a lot of investigation into that. There is a lot of suspicion on the last person the Tellarite spoke to, who is Ambassador Sarek. He also seems to be very closed about his whereabouts, and it doesn't seem like he's beyond murder, Ambassador Sarek, if he was pushed to it, because we see that in their argument that he actually easily pushes him back. So that's the start of the second act in the investigations, and there's something going on with Sarek. He doesn't reveal a whole lot. By the end of the second act, this is where my problem is. We'll discuss about that when we discuss in detail. Is Kirk suddenly starts fighting with this antenna guy who suspiciously looks like Reese Witherspoon for some unexplained reason. So I'm going to refer to him as Reese Witherspoon for the rest of the episode because I don't remember the name. And Reese basically stabs Kirk, and Kirk now seeks help. That's how the second act ends. Of course, Sarah was admitted to sick bay prior to this. Kirk probably has to join him also. Third act starts off with the scene in the sick bay, which is we have lots of sick people now. One is Kirk stabbed with his left lung punctured. Sarek already admitted, and also they talk about the Andoran prisoner in the brig who's just stabbed Kirk. So lots of people who are held in different places. And now, of course, Spock is in command. So that's how the third act starts. The third act is establishing the big conflict between Spock and his mom, Kirk trying to patch up things. And by the end of it, we find that Reese Witherspoon's antenna is a transmission device. So that's what we see. And this whole ship thing, the twinkly light that you see, we don't see a ship actually, we see only a twinkly light. It seems to go zip zap and basically torments the USS Enterprise with all its guns and phasers and all that. There's the scene in the sick bay. The second is the bridge scene. So this is what goes back and forth. We see that both are equally important. That's how third act ends. Fourth act starts with USS Enterprise firing photon torpedoes on the ship, but misses again because it's this twinkly light ship is too small to be hit and fast to be targeted by the USS Enterprise. And power goes off in the sick bay, so that's not a good thing. But McCoy is trying to manage the scene there. Fourth act ends with a lot of back and forth, and eventually, so there are so many things happening. One is the Andorran prisoner who's inexplicably brought to the bridge. Then there's the scene where now Kirk is admitted back into the sick bay after the Andorran prisoner dies. We see the sick bay scene is it ends with McCoy getting the last word. Well, it ended well. Let me put it that way. So, what do you think of Journey to Babel, Parvati?
The first time I saw it, I didn't quite get it, and it seemed a little too chaotic. There were so many characters, and I think this is the first time in Star Trek TOS that we see so many alien races that look completely distinct. For example, in our previous episode, while we were talking about the Klingons are basically human with some eyebrows, bushy eyebrows. That's
Yeah,
about it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the Vulcans are human with slanted eyebrows and pointy ears. And here you actually have some diversity because you have the Andorans who are blue and have antenna, and then you have the Tellarites who look like swine, I guess. I'm not very sure, but they do
yeah.
look a little odd by that reckoning. And then you also have those short gold skin aliens. We don't know who they are. And there are some
Mm.
others also who look quite distinct. It is a lot to take in suddenly. And then you have this parallel story of Spock's father, and it was a little bit too much at the first time I saw it because there were so many parallel storylines. You have to follow what all these delegates are doing in the Enterprise, and then it's not very clear about what they intend to do with the planet Coridan. They want to admit it into the Federation, and at the same time, some people don't want to admit it into the Federation, but they're at the delegation anyway. It was a politics was very murky as it usually is. At the same time, you have Spock here trying to be stubborn, and his father's sick, and you have to follow that, and then you have to follow his inner conflicts. The second time around when I watched it, I think that maybe it was familiarity with what was going on that made me focus more on the storylines time. It's interesting, there are a lot of things happening, and of course, like you did point out in your 4 act structure reveal, that you suddenly cut to the scene of Kirk fighting with one of those Andorans. It is a little disjointed, I think. Overall, it was fine. It had its moments. What about you, Bala?
I agree with you that the first time I saw it, there was just so many things going on. Actually, there are only two distinct storylines, and we see that back and forth, switch much more
Yeah,
rapid towards the fourth act. The one storyline is the Spock and Sarek conflict, right? And
yeah,
his mom, Amanda Sarek. So this is the one story, one, let's say, the main focus. Then there's this whole political angle combined with what's going on outside. So the
yeah.
spy ship and the spy on board. These are the only two things that one has to follow.
True.
But when I saw it the first time, there's politics, espionage going on. Then there is this whole deal with Spock and Sarek. And then there's the mom. And then there is McCoy and Kirk. Like you said, there's so many types of aliens that we have never seen before, and
True.
we are totally that scene still lingers on in your head before you can get back to the story,
Mm.
and it kind of starts getting overwhelming.
Yep.
But the second time around, you push those novel things from your head, and then you can focus entirely on, okay, what's really going on here? Story A, story B, and how do they alternate and how do they relate? I remember not liking the episode at all. I mean, not one bit did I
Mm.
like Journey to Babel. So whenever I used to scroll through a list of episode, I used to skip Journey to Babel. I never seen it a second screening at all. For our
Yeah.
podcast, I saw it the second time, and I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like, oh boy, 45 minutes gone. Like, not one time did I actually check my watch. So, which is a good sign for this
Mhm.
episode.
The second time when I rewatched it, that was when I realized that this actually does have only two storylines. And it wasn't as, there weren't as many threads as I thought, but unfortunately, it required two watching. That the Andorans was so bizarre looking that I got quite distracted seeing them.
Even right from the teaser, right? So we get a good glimpse of this conflict between Sarek and Spock. We don't know what it is, but there is a conflict brewing. We can see that. We see why in start of the first act itself, because like mom says, oh, you haven't learned to smile, and dad says, oh, this guy should have joined the Vulcan Science Academy, but he did his own thing by
Yeah,
joining you guys. So you can see lots of unsatisfied expectation from Spock, who seemed to be the rebel when choosing his career. So
true.
that's pretty cool. The fact that what had happened between them is so relatable. Father's desires versus son's actions, they didn't match. That's it. The
Yeah.
parent and what they want for their child and what the child eventually does.
Because what Spock has achieved. And
Mm.
Sarek's wife is Spock's mom. She does point that out to him that you are proud of your son, but he cannot admit it because he's a Vulcan and there's no room for such emotions in his head. I do think that that was really portrayed. And you also find Spock struggling. He's torn between his mother and his father because his mother, being human, does have a lot of emotional outbursts. She sees things passionately, whereas his father is incredibly detached from everything and he is a very logical person. So you don't know where you stand with him because it's just all logic all the time. And Spock here is in the middle, trying to be a Vulcan, but he's not exactly a Vulcan. And you find out that he had some childhood trauma from being a half blood. All of that is very relatable. They did that well. And when you come to that point where he has to take this experimental drug to increase his blood production and offer a transfusion to his father, those parts were quite well done. I just
Mm.
wish that there was a little less noise when it came to the politics and the Enterprise getting attacked. And then you have the Andorans who are not Andorans. It was definitely enjoyable the second time around, like you said.
And now, speaking about this, gives me the idea that perhaps they could have teased two episodes out of this, right? One could be the
Yeah.
whole Andoran spy thing. It could have been a great spy thrill with some other mission rather than keeping it between the conflict between Spock's and the other episode could be the Spock Sarek thing, right? So they could have kept that as an episode, and with
Yeah.
him not revealing that he has a heart condition, and him
Mm,
and Spock, he's been a rebel, so he's taken his own decisions here, but he's done very well with
yeah.
his decisions, and still Sarek not admitting that these are great achievements one should be proud of, and he also says that, right? He tells Amanda that you should not embarrass him in front of the other officers and all that.
Correct.
So he's quite, actually, he knows what he has achieved and what he has done, and he's in quote unquote proud of it. That's the part I enjoyed. It was fodder for two episodes. Perhaps it could have been teased out.
Yes. That portion where Spock's mother talks about him having a pet,
Yeah,
it
teddy
was
bear,
a
and
teddy
look at
bear with six
McCoy's
inch teeth.
face. McCoy's
6-inch
face
fang.
is like, you had a fat
Yeah,
teddy bear.
I know. And he says, he tries to tease him about it, and Spock, with that deadpan expression, says a teddy bear with 6 inch
6 inch fangs.
fangs.
And they are
That sounds
live.
ominous. That sounds ominous. So they did show a clash of culture there. At that
Mm,
point,
mm,
Sarek is actually berating his wife for
mm,
humiliating his son in front of the others.
mm.
Because I think in Sarek's mind, the display of emotion is probably a sign of weakness. And Spock's mother kind of made him vulnerable, is what his father feels, by revealing that he had an attachment to something which maybe is not acceptable in Vulcan society. And I thought that was an interesting touch.
It starts off with Kirk admitting that both of them are stubborn. You can
Yeah,
tell that in spite of all the Vulcan this, Vulcan that, they're still displaying hardcore human emotions more than anything else,
exactly.
being stubborn and sticking to their point of view and not. I mean, 18 years they're not spoken to each other, so that clearly tells you something there. That was a nice take on father son relationship right there.
True. Given the Vulcan lifespan,
Mm.
it's no, it's still a very long time, even with the Vulcan
Yeah,
lifespan.
that's a fifth of their life. So
That's a very long time. And I cannot imagine how incredibly stubborn each of them is
mm,
to kind of cut each other off for 18 years. They don't understand each other very well. And at the same time, when Spock manages to save his father's life towards the end of this episode, you do see that they have some kind of banter. There
yeah.
is some sort of a friendship, maybe.
Mm, mm.
And poor Amanda is caught in the middle, understanding neither of them.
Amanda talks about it, like you pointed out.
Hmm.
Uh, just after that, there's a ship going past at Warp 10, and that juxtaposition was what I think was jarring for us in our first watching, right? So then there is the Tellarite and Sarah conflict, and that's the third sequence. We are
Hmm.
left to try to understand what's going on here. You give it your full attention, and still you're not getting it. That back and forth, you don't pay attention to what they're arguing about, because Sarah says they just argue for the sake of arguing. So I'm not listening to what they're arguing about. But it actually gives you a clue on the fact that there is some kind of illegal stuff going on, and there's dilithium. Because those are all vital pieces of info. So
Yeah.
to me, I missed out that in the first
Hmm.
watching because of these. That he says, "Hey, there's no. They just argue for the sake of it into this." So I didn't pay attention to it. So that's why I missed that whole political side to things.
One of the things that struck me just now while you were talking about the details is a lot of the details were missed. I missed a lot of details the first time I watched it. I mean, looking at Memory Alpha right now and looking through the list of delegates on the Enterprise, you
Oh,
find that there are aliens with big hair. I did not see aliens with big hair because it was so fleeting. There are aliens in dresses, apparently. Again, I didn't see them because it was fleeting. The details were there, but you weren't allowed enough time to notice them and appreciate them. And most of them just slipped by. I mean, there are purple skinned aliens apparently, and a purple skinned ambassador. I did not see her. There were so many details. You weren't
mm,
given enough time to look at or assimilate any of these details, and they just went over my head the first time. The second
yeah.
time, I knew what to
Mm.
look for a little more, and so it
Mm.
made sense.
Actually, there's a parallel between this and in New Hope. There is a cantina scene. I'm
Okay.
referring to Star Wars here, of course. Episode 4,
Sacrilege.
New Hope, and there's a cantina scene where there's a whole host of aliens, and I think very similar looking to this scene here. Maybe I know that George Lucas was a fan of Star Trek at some point of
Mhm.
time. That might have inspired him to do this scene. Cantina
Mhm.
scene is memorable because it has catchy music and tons of aliens. So it gives you a totally space feeling that you are in another planet, and there are people who may look completely different. You are allowed to soak in each detail. They give enough screen time. You see that they have different kinds of drinks. You see that those gold skin people take something and put it into a drink long necked bottle where they take their drinks from and pour it, and they're speaking an alien tongue, and you get just a whiff of that. Compare that to the cantina scene where you can I recall pretty much every alien that I saw in the cantina scene in Star Wars. Here, I missed all of them. I don't remember all the other aliens that you talked about.
The gold skinned aliens, they weren't given much time. There's a screenshot here of the purple skinned delegate who looks quite interesting, and I completely missed this individual. And
Ah.
there's all the big haired aliens. I think there should have been more time spent on showing what they wanted to show instead of pushing everything to the background. It got confusing, and I missed half the delegation in that room, which is very
Hmm.
unfortunate.
If this had been a journey to Babel without the Sarek Spock conflict, maybe they could have spent some time where Kirk introduces the Vulcan ambassador to different delegates, and that could have completed it. They had that sort of quick shot after shot, but
Yeah.
somehow integrating that into the story would have really helped. So, a lot of baggage could have been reduced, but still coverage could have been easier on this part. They did spend a lot of time trying to get these aliens to make it an interplanetary conference. So they had taken the pains to do that, but it would have been really nice for even the audience to enjoy that. That's where I'm missing this.
Exactly. And by the time you shift to what is happening to Sarek, you are already a little bit bewildered because in the middle of all this, you have Sarek having some sort of a medical emergency. You need Spock to do something to save his life. In the second viewing, all of that made most sense.
Hmm.
But the one thing that did not make sense was that scene where you suddenly find Kirk fighting. It was so choppy that there was no time for the transition. I couldn't figure out how that happened. How suddenly Kirk became a target. It didn't make much sense to me, Bala.
Actually, the second act started off very well with all the suspicion now on Sarak, because
Exactly.
one, he's not telling us where he has gone. He's
Mm.
not telling us even his wife where he had been. So that,
Yes.
of course, it was probably, having seen so many thrillers so far, we know that in a murder mystery, you do set the audience off on a false trail. But this is
Mhm.
interesting. Sarak is the prime suspect, and how is he going to wriggle his way out? Because everything seems to point towards that. He has had a heated argument. He is capable of murder. He just demonstrated it to us. In spite of his advanced age, he's quite capable of physical violence.
He's capable of it. Gav was murdered with a Vulcan execution technique, the Talshaya.
Talshaya?
Yeah.
Talshaya? Yeah, yeah.
So obviously, only a Vulcan would know that, is what you would think. It's a diversionary tactic because
Right.
the only Vulcan on board who is capable of killing may not be the Vulcan who actually did the killing, may not be the alien at all who did the killing. That was an interesting aspect of Vulcan society that they slipped in there, that they have this technique called Talshaya and it kills your opponent quickly. That was
Mm.
an interesting part of what Vulcan culture that they introduced there. And it is also interesting because you get this feeling that Sarek might not have murdered Gav, but somebody
Mm.
did. So you feel the politics, it's heating up, getting more confusing, you don't know what's happening. That is actually quite interesting.
But on the other hand, they took that all that out by saying, "Oh, I had my third heart attack during this, so I couldn't have done this." I'm like
Thoroughly,
deflated here because
yeah,
they had built up all that, pointing every piece of evidence towards Sarak, and then one pinprick, and the whole thing is gone. So,
exactly.
and now we are like pitying Sarak, saying, "Oh my God, poor thing. He's had his fourth attack now, and he requires T negative, which is a rare blood thing." And then suddenly, like you said, Kirk's fighting for his life. There's this blue guy who's Reese Witherspoon, who's trying to stab Kirk.
I mean,
I don't
the
know.
blue
It's just
Andoran there, Bala, did you notice, also had human colored hands in that scene?
oh, really? Okay. That is probably the stunt double who did that.
Yeah,
Maybe they had
probably.
not dressed that person up as colorful as the original and well, quote unquote Andoran.
Yes.
Right.
At this point, I confess I was a little bit annoyed with Sarek, who casually says he had 3 heart attacks just like that. And his wife didn't
Yeah.
even know that he had had these heart attacks. If he had confessed that he had these issues, maybe they could have gotten him his rare blood type before. But no, he had to wait. He's as stubborn as Spock.
That's that. So third act started off with this guy, right? So they had a prisoner now. Now this ship we don't know. There's something that's following, and now Spock refuses to do that. So that was interesting because now Spock was ready to give his blood with
In
this
the beginning. Yes.
experimental drug. Suddenly now refuses because his captain is not up to it. So he has to
Yeah.
be the one who will take it up. You get frustrated with Spock because he has such high opinion of himself, right? He thinks he's the only person on this entire ship who can, take care of the spy situation,
Yeah.
and be in command. Well, whereas at the end, Kirk relinquishes command to Chekhov and leaves. We don't see Scotty take up command. There's
Spock, I
Chekhov.
mean, it's. I think Kirk is so delirious by then that he's just let Chekhov have the controls for now. I'm too
Right,
tired. I can't
and
think.
he's a junior ensign, right?
That might have made a very interesting episode to have Chekhov run the Enterprise. I would love to see what he does. Turn everything Russian, probably. I don't know what he would do, but it would be interesting.
So, but what I liked in the third act was particularly this Spock versus Amanda, sequence.
Yes.
That was incredible. That was really, really incredible.
Absolutely
She,
incredible.
there are
Yeah.
some stellar performances there by both
And she is trying
Leonard
so
Nimoy and.
hard to reach that human part of Spock, and he keeps pushing her away. Absolutely nothing she can do. She's trying to plead with him. And it
Mm,
is a very poignant scene.
yep.
Nothing she does has any effect on Spock. Or at least it's not enough of an effect to make him do something. He
Mm.
feels, but he still won't do it. And that is so frustrating for her that she just slaps him there. And it's well deserved at that point. He comes across as incredibly stubborn, incredibly cold. He may not actually be cold, but his actions definitely were.
Mm.
And his mother pleading with him has zero effect on anything that he does, which is, he was bordering on cruel at that point. He could have at least considered that what she's saying is worthy of listening to, following, or listening to, something of that sort.
And she does what we all wanted to do: slap him.
From the beginning, slap him. Oh, yes. I, it was one of
Yes.
those things where your hands were itching to slap him, and she did it and let him have
Yes.
it. And it
Rules,
was well deserved.
regulations,
Yeah.
philosophy, responsibility,
And
duty,
all that
all that he mentioned.
nonsense, I swear. It was coming. It was absolutely coming. I mean, she's here pleading for his father's life and begging him to undergo his medical procedure. And what does he do? He spouts Vulcan philosophy and all
Mm.
sorts of vague, hyperbolic, beliefs. Slap was it was well deserved. It had to be done. And it was something that I think while you watch it, you feel that you'd like to do it yourself, but she did it.
And that's when Kirk comes up with this beautiful plan of
Yeah.
him pretending that he's all right till he can convince Spock that he's to go and get his transfusion done. That was Kirk's brilliance there at work.
Absolute brilliance. He knows that this is the only thing that will get Spock to relinquish command and go back to the sick bay. Is this is the only way Spock will listen to any reason is if Kirk can somehow pretend that he's perfectly all right. And you can see the pain on his face, Bala, when he goes back to
Yeah.
the bridge.
Yep.
He's in so much pain, he can't keep his expression together. And he somehow keeps his voice strong. He keeps his expression pleasant and gets Spock out of there. That was brilliant.
Yeah, that's a very nice part of the whole episode.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then, of course, the whole surgery scene happens where Spock realizes the power utilization curve is something wrong with that. Then McCoy
Yeah.
says nothing doing. You just stay here. He gives him a powerful sedative and done.
Wasn't
Shuts him
there a
up.
quote there? My patients do not walk out in the middle of surgery.
Yes, yes, yes. So that was a medical slap there. So that's the second time Spock gets slapped.
They sedate him immediately and he just falls
Yes.
asleep. He has no chance against that.
That
My
was good.
don't walk out in the middle of an operation. That's what he said.
And Kirk now has to really play the hero because the ship is in trouble and they need
Big
his
trouble.
experience there. So to I don't think anybody who could have pulled that off with the
Yeah.
tactics that he had. So it had to be Kirk, even in his really sorry situation. He still stayed there, stuck around, and
Yes,
got the job done.
exactly. He got it done. He somehow staggered up to the bridge. You can, I mean, like I said before, you can see the pain on his face, and it's painful for you to watch it because
Hmm.
he's in such incredible pain and he has to keep his posture erect. He has to keep his voice strong. He has to keep his hands from trembling. And then somehow he goes up there and gives Spock that order to go back down to the med bay. It was very well executed, that scene.
And this for the fourth act, this Sarak thing was a distraction for me because I really liked the spy thing coming. There's the guy on the bridge. Inexplicably, they bring the prisoner on the bridge. Why from the bridge? I don't understand why they would do that. It is on Kirk's command, but why would you bring that? There was nothing there, so that he can find out something about the ship, the spy ship. I'm not sure what's going on there.
He can find out some. I mean, he could have easily punched Kirk again, and that would have been
Yeah,
it. It was a
correct.
very dangerous, risky maneuver bringing him to the bridge. Why does this enemy have access to the most sensitive part of the ship? One of the most sensitive parts of the ship, anyway.
No, and the security guys just drop him near Kirk and say, "Okay, there's his wound. If you punch him, he'll be dead within a few seconds. So here, let
Exactly.
me expose him there." Is that what you're trying to do?
Logical. And why did he think that bringing this character to the bridge would make him confess to anything? He really
Hmm,
didn't. I mean, he was just standing there mocking Kirk, mocking the Enterprise, mocking humanity, mocking everything, and being an
hmm,
all-round annoyance. And I think
right.
it was sheer luck that he decided not to attack. And
So
it's also,
finally,
I mean, it's also very surprising, Bala, because they didn't know what race he was from. They
hmm,
knew that he wasn't an Andoran, but they didn't know which race he was from. They hadn't found that out yet. And they were still willing to take the risk to bring him up to
yep,
the bridge. Sense. It made no
correct.
sense.
His hands were free, and the security guys were on Kirk's left hand side. This guy was on his right. So it's all basically he was free to do whatever he wanted
I think it must have been the West that did it. It didn't fit him in the first place, and maybe they were so distracted by it that they
to.
did,
Yeah.
acted out completely illogically.
Right, and then just to finish that, they used that whole miscalculated thing. So did they,
Exactly.
just to have a brilliant end to that scene. They just had that. But anyway, self destruct here, done.
Yep.
That at least closed. Of course, McCoy says, "Are you done shaking the ship around? I had a surgery to perform. You guys are busy
And
shaking
you're
the ship."
shaking the ship around. I mean, can't you sit still for once in your life?
Uh, okay. Of course, here is then the whole resolution, right? So Amanda and Trek and Spock and Kirk and McCoy, all of them are there. Thank you should have been there, but they say, "Oh, that's illogical to thank somebody."
And she finally lets them have it in there. Why did you marry her? It seemed logical at the time.
Logical thing to do at the time.
Logical thing to do is to marry an emotional human. Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Of
But
course,
yeah,
now the attention turns to McCoy.
yes. I
He look,
loved that part where he said, "Shut up" to Spock. Yes, that's it.
and he's
Exactly.
shushing everybody around. They're like,
Yes.
you shut up, shush, shush.
And they actually listened to him. What do you know? I
Yeah.
mean, there was actual silence in the sick bay. Yes, I
Yeah.
think that was a genius end to this
Absolutely
story.
amazing end. Yeah. So that brings us to our likes and dislikes section. What did you like and dislike about this episode, Parvati?
So I really like that they introduced so many alien races here, and they introduced some sort of diversity to the populace of the galaxy, which was fun. And I enjoyed watching the politics between them, even though it was a little confusing the first time. It was still interesting. And the father-son relationship between Spock and Sarek, that was all the Sarek and Spock, that was also very well done. And also the mother-son relationship between Amanda and Spock was also extremely well executed. You could actually feel her pain, and those were aspects of this episode that I enjoyed so much. And one part that I absolutely adored, in addition to all of this, was when Kirk decides to play the hero. He had a reason this time, and I cannot imagine the kind of physical and emotional strength it takes to do what he did. And that those were all done really, really well. About what I didn't like, it's, I think, connected to what I said in the beginning of my likes and dislikes. There are too many aliens, and we didn't get enough time to actually see them. And that threw me into a loop for a little bit. You also have the politics, while interesting. I wish there was a little bit more clarity as to what was happening on that planet they were talking about with the dilithium crystals. It was a little bit too much overwhelming. And okay, that one scene where you suddenly find Kirk fighting an Andoran with human colored hands, that was also very distracting. What about you, Bala?
I loved McCoy's quips,
Yep.
starting from the uniform to the salute. He says, and when talking about the salute, he says, "Oh, that hurts worse than the uniform."
Yes,
So,
he does. The Vulcan salute.
Vulcan salute and teddy bear stuff and all the and of course the last one. What do you know? I finally got the last word. So that,
Yes, the banter was amazing in this one.
and you already covered the two things that I've written in my notes as well, which is Spock versus Amanda, Spock
Mm,
versus Sarek. So both of
yep.
these are pretty much the centerpiece of the entire episode. Particularly, I think the, let's say, two, what do you call, the subtext, if you will. One
Mm,
is the father's disappointments with son's choice of career. That
yep.
was one sort of stream going through. The
Mm,
second one was the whole diplomacy stuff. That is
yep.
dilithium crystals, where that's a source of power and
Mm,
that seems to feed a war to both sides. So
mm, yes.
that that sort of they touched upon that, and that's where my dislike comes in. Also, is that the diplomacy premise was very shaky grounds, and now I think the better idea would have been to completely disengage these two plot lines and give them as two episodes, make them the center line, and give Reese Witherspoon more role or whatever the Andor. I don't know. Telva, Tetwa, whatever name that was.
Tellarite?
No, not the Tellarite. The two quote unquote Andoran, right? The spy. I
Right.
forget his name. Telva, I think, something like that. So I think Reese Witherspoon is good enough. So he looks like Reese Witherspoon. So that, and that other Andoran was complete wasted screen time. I mean, he talks about passion and no logic and all that. That was, you could have given that to just looking at us, looking at those, because we are watching sci-fi for the sci-fi ness of it, and aliens are definitely part of the sci-fi part.
Yes,
We would have definitely loved to see more of those, aliens. Um,
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
the touchy feely versus the action packed, the that
Yeah,
gelling didn't work for me.
it didn't.
I like the touchy feely stuff. I like the
Mm.
action packed sequence, but juxtaposition of this did not work for me. That's where I had a problem.
I
So
also
that's
had got
that's
this feeling that the Andorans weren't very well drawn because they seem to be rather stupid.
Hmm,
This ambassador has a non-Andoran as an aide for so long, and he had no idea that he
yeah,
wasn't. I mean,
correct.
we don't know at what level their technology rests, but still, it was a bit jarring at that point. And he's not even concerned. He's like Spock talking about philosophy and
Hmm.
things that have absolutely no relevance to the current situation.
That brings us to the hypothetical question: if the screenwriter were to appear in our podcast, what would you ask them to change or explain?
I think I would like them to consider splitting this into two, like you mentioned before, because there are so many details that were just glossed over, and some clarity would be nice, particularly since you decided to introduce so many alien races. We would like to see and interact a bit more with them, and perhaps reduce the philosophy just a little bit and focus more on what the politics is and what is going on and what prompted Sarek to actually do what he did by hiding his illnesses. And a little bit more exploration on that front would have helped, I think. Although altogether I did like this episode, I still feel that there are a lot of loose threads Ultimately, we don't even know the resolution to the dilithium crystal situation because it is a little bit murky. What about you, Bala?
I think this whole twist at the end that it was not an Andoran but an Orion
Yeah,
didn't make any sense to me because I don't know Andorans, I don't know Orions, right?
exactly.
So if they had changed Reese Witherspoon's role to something more benign at the beginning, like a pacifist, okay, and
Mm,
then suddenly at the end twisted it saying, "Oh, the pacifist at the start, that guy is actually the violent guy," that would have given us a jolt, saying, "Oh my God, that guy was the peace broker and is actually the one who's benefiting out of this because he's actually war brokering or something like that."
exactly.
So that would have given this whole twist real. Oh wow, I didn't expect that because here I'm like, okay, Andoran, Orion, whatever. Right? So they're just different colored aliens to me. I don't care. So it is a good action sequence, but I didn't care about the big reveal that there's probably modified appearance because for me both of them are unknown entities anyway. So that
Even,
would be
yeah,
my suggested change.
exactly.
All right. So it was fun discussing Journey to Babel. And thank you, Parvati, for your analysis. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.